Hey everybody, and welcome back to Firebase Semi-Live, the live coding show in which I code stuff live and you watch it later. So if you've been following along, in the last episodes, we've built a little to-do list application using SwiftUI and connected it to Firebase. All the data is stored in Firestore, which gives us a couple of nice benefits, such as a flexible data model, live synchronization, and offline mode out of the box. One thing that we looked into last time was how to make sure each user can have their own list of tasks, and we made use of Firebase Anonymous Authentication to achieve this. The great thing about Firebase Anonymous Authentication is that your users don't have to fill out any sign-up form to get started with your application. And this reduces a lot of friction and makes the onboarding process much smoother. However, as Anonymous Auth results in a user ID for every new device that you run the application on, this means your users can't access their tasks from different devices, say their iPhone and an iPad they might use at home. The good news is this is easy to fix by integrating one of the identity providers that Firebase supports. So let's look at that. If we go into the authentication section of our project over here and go into the sign-in method, we can see there are quite a few providers that Firebase supports, such as Google, Facebook, Twitter, GitHub, and Apple Sign-In. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to implement Sign-In with Apple using Firebase Authentication. First of all, as you might remember, we need to turn on this authentication mechanism. So let's tap here and then enable it. So this is good enough for our application because we're only building an iOS application. And let's hit save. And that's it. So there are a couple of things that we need to do in terms of implementation, and we will start by implementing a SwiftUI version of the Sign In with Apple button. So it might be surprising to hear that Apple didn't provide a SwiftUI version of that, but that's just the way it is. So let's go here into the Views folder, add a new file. Let's add a new Swift file. Let's call it Sign In with Apple button. And then, first of all, let's import SwiftUI. Let's also import the authentication services. And then let's build a new Sign In with Apple button. And let's make it a UI view representable. So you might know that you can use UI view representables to basically wrap UI kit components and make them available to SwiftUI. And that's what we're doing here. So let's create the methods that we need to create in order to wrap a UI element. The first one is make UI view, and this is the place where we actually create the button. And this is pretty straightforward. So return as authorization Apple ID button. That's quite a class name. And then the type is a sign-in button. And for now, let's use black as a style. And then there is another method we need to implement, which is the update UI view method. So this is in case you want to propagate any property changes back into the underlying class itself. So there are a couple of errors, and I believe that these are due to the fact that we need to update the return value up here. and then obviously down here as well. Cool. So that's our sign-in button. Now let's go ahead and implement a very simple sign-in view. We can go back to our views group, add a new file, and this time around it's a SwiftUI view, sign-in view. And let's go ahead and add a little welcome text or something like that. So thanks for using make it so please sign in. Please sign in here. And then we want to add the sign-in button, but obviously we need to wrap this in a VStack. So VStack, and then add our sign-in button down there. Sign in with Apple button. So let's see how this looks like in the preview. Takes a little while to compile because we've got a lot of dependencies by now. All right, almost there. Okay, so this is how the UI looks like. So it's obviously not exactly how we'd like it to look like. So there are a couple of things that we need to do. First of all, let's use a proper frame for the button. So let's go ahead and, for example, let's try 280 for the width and 45 for the height. Don't need any alignment. Okay, so this looks a lot better. Awesome. And then we can listen to the tap event. So when the user taps on the button, because that's the moment where we want to kick off the sign-in flow. But for now, let's make sure that when the sign-in flow is finished, this dialog actually disappears. In order to do that, we're going to wrap an environment value. So environment, and the value that we're interested in is the presentation mode. Presentation mode. And we're going to make that available as presentation mode. And that means in here, we can go and then dismiss this after the user has tapped on the button. So one thing that we absolutely want to make sure is that we give users a great experience when using your application. So how many times have you come across an application where the very first thing they ask you to do is create an account and sign in and come up with a password and, you know, all of that stuff? That's really off-putting. And, you know, most users in this situation will probably rather uninstall the application than going through the chore of creating a new account. So I recommend you try to avoid this as much as possible. And one good way to do that is, you know, use anonymous authentication, just as we did in the last episode, to let users start using and trying your application without requiring them to sign in. And only once you've convinced your users that your application is really a great application, show them that there are a couple of benefits of actually signing in and creating an account. So for example, you might tell them, hey, if you sign in, you can share your lists with your friends and family, or you can use the application on another device. And this is exactly what we're going to do. So in order to make this a good experience, we are not going to put up a sign-in wall right in the front of the application when it starts up, but instead we're going to add a tiny little account button to the navigation bar. And when the user taps on this button, we're going to display the sign-in sheet that we just built, ask them to sign in, and once they're signed in, all their data will automatically be migrated. And this is a much better experience for users because then they can choose when is the moment they want to sign in. OK, so let's do that. So what we need to do in order to add this button is let's go to our task list view. And then first of all, let's create a small flag that we can use to turn show the sign-in sheet. So let's go ahead and create this. So show sign-in form. So when this is true, we want to show the form. So we set it to false to make sure that the sign-in form is currently hidden. And then let's find a good space to add this. I think here would be a good place. So .sheet. And then is presented. And let's bind this to show sign-in. It's actually sign-in form, not sign-in firm. Sign-in form. And then when this is shown, let's display the sign-in view. Cool. All right. And then we need to add a button to the navigation bar. Navigation bar items, and let's add it to the trailing end. And let's add a button and set an action. And then when the user presses the button, we want to toggle this field in order to trigger the sign-in form. OK. And down here, let's create an image for the button, and let's use person.circle. OK. Let me balance the indentation. This looks good. Let's try this. OK, tap on the button, and the sign-in form appears. That's great. And when I tap on the sign-in button, it should disappear. Cool. So the next step that we need to take is implement a SignInWithAppleCoordinator. So this is a class that has a lot of responsibilities, and it basically handles the entire sign-in with Apple flow. And thankfully, a lot of the code that we need to write is already in the documentation. So we are going to do a lot of copy and pasting in this section, but bear with me. So first of all, let's create a new group here. Let's call it services. Pull it down a little bit on the repositories. Oh, let's put it here. And then create a new file and call it SignInWithAppleCoordinator. And the first thing that we need to do is, let's have a look at the documentation. Sign in with Apple Firebase. And first of all, we need to copy this method here, this function, which gives us a so-called nonce. So this is a random string that we will use to send to the API to make sure that when it returns to us, that we can be sure that we were actually the ones who have sent this request. So this helps us prevent request forgery. So that is one step. And then above that, we're going to create our class, the SignInWithAppleCoordinator. And then we'll take some more code from here. Let's take this part. So this basically kicks off the sign-in flow. And this part down here is for computing the SHA for our nonce. So let's paste those two pieces here. And the import needs to go up here. And now it complains about a couple of unsatisfied imports. So we also need to import the authentication services. And now it complains that it can't assign this value to self. So we can remove that by making sure that we implement NSObject by also implementing the AS authorization controller presentation context providing protocol. All right, there you go. But it needs to be a colon like this. Cool. And then let's add the stub. So this method will be called in order to figure out what's the window that's going to present the sign-in with Apple flow. And we can basically just go ahead and go ask the UI application for all its windows and take the first window, because there's only one window. Cool. So, and then there is another problem. So we don't have the delegate yet, so AS authorization controller delegate. And we can also take this from the documentation. So it's here. So let's copy this piece of code and insert it here. And then this is an extension, and currently this is for main view controller. We don't have a main view controller, so we're going to make this an extension on SignInWithAppleCoordinator like this. Okay, so this is now an extension to our class. It doesn't know about the OAuth provider, and that's a class that comes from Firebase, so we will add an import for Firebase up here. So this should be gone now. There is a slight misspelling, so let's fix this. That's great. And then Let's actually remove this piece here. Because we want to do something slightly different. So instead of signing in, actually what we want to do is we want to link. So the user goes through the sign in with Apple flow, and then they get credentials, and then we want to link those credentials that we've got up here with our existing anonymous user credentials. So let's do it like this. So auth.auth.current_user. So our current user is our anonymous user. And we're going to link this user with the credentials that we've received from the sign in with Apple flow. And then here is the auth result. And it might throw an error. And let's actually implement a little bit of error handling. So if there is an error, we will print an error message. So error signing in error dot localized description. If there is no error, we can go ahead, and then we want to invoke a callback. And this is basically our way of signaling to the caller that the flow has finished, and the caller can remove or dismiss the sign-in form and go back to the main list view because the user has now signed in successfully. So in order to be able to call this callback, we need to first define it. So let's go back up into our class up here and create a private property to capture this callback. Let's call it onSignedIn. And we don't want to send any information for now. Maybe we'll later send a signed-in user, but for now, we just want to know, have we been successful? Let's make this optional. And then when we kick off the sign-in flow, we want to provide this callback so it can be called at the end of the flow. So onSignedIn, and this is an escaping closure. And then we need to keep track of that. Self.onSignedIn equals onSignedIn. And now we can go back down here and call our callback. Okay, so if it's not nil, we can call it on callback. So now we need to go back into our sign-in view and then actually call and instantiate our sign-in coordinator. So let's do this right here. Sign in with Apple Coordinator. And call it with start sign in with Apple flow. And then here's our callback. And then when the callback fires, what we want to do is maybe print something like you successfully sign in, and then dismiss the sign-in view that we see on the right-hand side here. So that's great. I think there is going to be a little problem when we hold on to the coordinator just here in the closure. So let's actually make this a state variable up here so that we can properly track it. And that is a SignInWithAppleCoordinator. Okay, so self.coordinator, and if let then we can actually call it. All right, so let's see if this works. Let's run the application. So here is the application. I press on the sign in button, sign in sheet pops up. I press on the sign in with Apple button, and it errors. Nice. So let's try to figure out what's the problem. So first of all, did we turn it on? Authentication. So it is not turned on. So that's the first thing that we need to turn on. Save it. All right. Let's refresh the page just to be sure. Okay, it's enabled. So the other thing that I think I forgot to do was to add the capability. So let's go to our project configuration here, go into signing and capabilities, and then press this little plus button up here, search for sign in, double click, and wait until the provisioning profile completes. All right, so hopefully that's it. Let's try again. Okay, so sign in form, sign in with Apple. All right, and there we go. So it now explains that sign in with Apple is fast and easy, respects your privacy, and you're able to hide your email if you're so inclined. So let's press let's do that again real quick. So let's press continue. And now it will ask me how I want to sign in. So am I happy to share my email? Yeah, why not? So select the email, continue with password because I'm running on a simulator. And now instead of me typing in the password, I'm going to pause the video for a second while I pull my password from my password manager. All right, so I've fetched my password from the password manager, and I'm going to insert it now. And I'm going to log in using my password into Sign In with Apple. A token arrives, and the callback fires, and we're back in the application as if nothing had happened. But if we go back to the console, we will see that our anonymous user has been upgraded to a permanent user. So I'm now able to sign in to this application using Sign In with Apple with my Apple ID. So let me demonstrate this by running the application on the second emulator again, and then signing in using my Apple ID. So let's do that. I'm going back to Xcode. Let's choose the other simulator. So I think that was the iPhone 11 Pro Max. And then run the application on there. There's the application. I'm still signed in to my anonymous account, so let me bring up the other simulator. Let's click on this button to trigger the sign-in flow, sign in with Apple, continue, use my Apple ID, share my password. Let's see if the password is still in the paste buffer. Okay, I've got my password, insert the password, sign in. And apparently there was a problem. So let's look at that. So here's an error message, and it says, this credential is already associated with a different user account. The reason why this happened was that we're actually using two different accounts here. So on the left-hand side, I had one anonymous account, and I upgraded that anonymous account. Let's call it A. So I used anonymous account A and upgraded it into a permanent account using Sign In with Apple. On the other side here, I've got another anonymous account. Let's call it anonymous account B. And I'm now trying to upgrade that as well into a permanent account using Sign In with Apple. And I use the same Apple ID. In that moment, Firebase says, oh, look what you did. You just tried to upgrade another account into this account. So this is a moment where you as a developer need to make a choice of asking the user, okay, so what do you want to do? Do you want to, was this by accident, or did you actually want to do that? What should happen with the data? Do you want to migrate the data that's in this account, in this anonymous account B? Do you want to upgrade that? So if we look at that, for example, you'll see that this account has different data than the other one. So do we want to migrate this data and make it part of this account, or don't we want to do that? So that's probably something that you should ask the user before making any decision. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to basically handle this situation, and then let's see where this takes us. So first of all, when you get this error message, you can handle this error message. So we need to basically go into our SignInWithAppleCoordinator, and then here where we have this very simple error handling, which is no error handling at all, we need to do better. So let's go ahead and do this. So first of all, we want to see if this error is the error code for this credential is already in use. So if let error equals error and error as error dot code equals auth error code dot credential already in use dot raw value. So if that's the case, then we have run into this very situation. Let's print something real quick. The user you're trying to sign in with has already been linked. Cool. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to sign in now in order to generate a new credential and link the existing account. So how we're going to do this is we're going to fetch the upgraded credential from the user info in the error. So this works like this. If let updated credential equals, and now let's cast the error again. Error as NS error. And then reach into the user info. And there is a key that we can use to get the upgraded credential. Auth error user info updated credential key. There it is. And make this into an OAuth credential. So if we've got this, we can do another printout, signing in using the updated credentials. And now we will do a sign-in flow. Sign in with the updated credential and then we need to see if there is a user in the result. And then we want to call the callback. So let's take this piece, insert it here. And this needs to be an auth result. And this error handling can go away. All right, so let's try running this. And let's actually put a breakpoint right here so we can see what's going on. So sign in with Apple, continue, share my email, paste my password. Okay, and here we go. So it says the user you're trying to sign in with has already been linked. So let's go on. We get the upgraded credential, and then we're signing in using this upgraded credential. Then we get the user. Let's have a look at that. PO user, user.uid. There we go. So it's a proper Firebase user. And now we can continue. And there we are. We're signed in to the application, and we're looking at the same data that we were looking at, or we are looking at the same data that is in the other simulator, and we're signed in to the same account on 2 different devices. All right, so one thing that we still need to do in order to handle this properly is to branch off at the beginning of the application start, and then detect whether we're already signed in or not. And only if we're already if we're not signed in already, try an anonymous sign-in. So let's do this. So if auth current user is nil, so nobody has signed in yet, we need to perform an anonymous sign-in. And if there already is a user, we can just keep going. So let's run the application again. on both simulators. Let me delete the data first. OK. So add new data here, tests, test2, and then run it on the second simulator. And as you can see, we're basically signed in with the same account on both applications. So whenever I make a change here, it will appear there. There you go. And checking an item also appears on the other end. So there you have it. And that's it for today. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Firebase Semi-Live, in which we looked at how to integrate Sign In with Apple into our to-do list application. If you're interested in more stuff like this, please let me know in the comments below, or follow my blog on peterfries.dev. Thanks for watching, and I will see you soon.